Coming up today, emerging after a grueling 15-hour questioning by prosecutors over bribery claims, former Prime Minister Lee Wan-koo says he defended his position and continues to deny the charges against him. South Korea warns North Korea that it isn't doing itself any favours by holding live-fire drills near the maritime border. The regime fired off even more rounds on Thursday. Plus, in a move that has unnerved Japan's neighbours, Shinzo Abe's cabinet approves bills allowing an expanded overseas role for the Japanese military. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Friday, May 15th here in Seoul. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with the latest developments on the ongoing bribery scandal here in Korea. And prosecutors grilled former Prime Minister Lee Wan-koo for 15 straight hours on Thursday over allegations he took more than $25,000 in illegal political funds from late businessman Song Wan-jong back in 2013 when he was running in a parliamentary by-election. Leaving the prosecutor's office in Seoul at roughly 1 a.m. Friday, around 5 hours ago, Lee told the awaiting horde of reporters that he maintained he did nothing wrong and fully defended his position of innocence. He also denied allegations that he attempted to persuade one of the witnesses to change his testimony. That witness had told prosecutors that Lee and Song were together in 2013 during Lee's run for a seat in the National Assembly. Prosecutors reportedly plan to indict the former Prime Minister and Gyeongsangnam-do Province Governor Hong Jun-pyo on charges of breaking the political funding law as early as next week. North Korea fired artillery shells into the West Sea near the de facto maritime border known as the Northern Limit Line for a second straight night on Thursday. The South Korean military says the North began the drill at 7:10 p.m. Korea time, firing some 190 shells, although none of them landed on the south side of the heavily patrolled waters. The drill itself lasted for about 2 hours and no clashes were reported. North Korea notified the South of the drill on Wednesday before firing off around 130 shells on that day. Pyongyang says the drill period will continue through midnight Friday. And while North Korea continues with its live-fire drills just north of the border, South Korea has called on Pyongyang to refrain from raising military tensions. Seoul has vowed to stick with its policy of building trust with the North, despite the regime's continual efforts to stir the pot. Han Dan reports.
Seoul's Unification Ministry says North Korea should realize that its repeated provocations do not at all help to improve inter-Korean ties. The remarks come after Pyongyang conducted military exercises near the Northern Limit Line late Wednesday night, live firing some 130 artillery shells from warships. Stressing that Pyongyang's provocations continue despite Seoul's efforts to thaw relations, the ministry urged the North to stop all threats and verbal attacks. However, officials emphasized that Seoul will stick to its Korean Peninsula trust process despite Pyongyang's hostility. First initiated by President Park Geun-hye, the trust process aims to achieve peaceful reunification with the North through dialogue and exchange. As for the escalating wage spat at the inter-Korean Kaesong Industrial Complex, the ministry said North Korea's unilateral decision to raise the minimum wage is illegal under the Kaesong Industrial Complex law established by the regime. Meanwhile, Unification Minister Hong Yong-pyo, during an executive meeting Thursday, ordered the National Intelligence Service to keep a close eye on the political situation in Pyongyang while maintaining stable inter-Korean relations. Han Dan, Arirang News.
A South Korean parliamentary subcommittee has verified North Korea's recent claim that it fired a ballistic missile from a submarine. On Thursday, a member of the Parliamentary Intelligence Committee said the National Intelligence Service refuted an earlier claim by a US expert that the North actually launched a missile from a submerged barge. That expert said the regime may have photoshopped its test photos to exaggerate the progress of its missile development program. The committee member went on to say that the spy agency is still trying to work out if the launch was successful or not. North Korea's gruesome public execution of its defense minister, Hyun Chul, one of its highest-level officials, is once again drawing the world's attention to the regime's rampant human rights violations. For an expert's insight on this issue, our Hwang Sang-hee sat down with the executive director of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. Let's take a look.
North Korea is executing its senior officers in the most gruesome way, according to Greg Scarlett, executive director of the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea.
You're talking about an execution by ZPU-4 anti-aircraft machine gun. If you're talking about a person being hit by automatic fire, by 50 caliber rounds, you're literally talking about bodies being pulverized, obliterated, turned into pink mist.
Last month, Scarlett released the first ever satellite images of a public execution of roughly 10 senior North Korean officers at Kanggun shooting range. He calls the killings a clear human rights violation, but adds the high-level executions could help bring about a change in the regime.
And remember, this is, after all, a Confucian or post-Confucian culture. Having something left, having a body, is very important. But they simply obliterated every trace, any trace that this person ever existed is eliminated. Now, certainly these executions have had a lot of coverage. So I believe that this will indeed result in enhanced awareness internationally.
What's behind the brutality, says Scarlett, is the young North Korean leader's insecurity. Noting Pyongyang's ties with Beijing have suffered after the execution of Chang Sung-taek, who was the North's point man on China, he says the recent execution of Defense Chief Hyun Chul may hurt relations with Russia. Hyun was the point man on Moscow and even met with the Russian president last year. If those factors cause the situation to deteriorate, Scarlett foresees more gruesome killings that could eventually shake up the entire regime.
For this reason, the regime continues to be unstable, and unfortunately, for as long as the regime continues to be unstable, the supreme leader, who also happens to be quite insecure, will be very tempted to continue with this gruesome practice and with these executions.
And could these constant purges and executions in turn destabilize the Kim Jong-un regime?
We're coming to the realization that the highest ranking officials of North Korea are also victims of human rights violations. I wonder, wouldn't those same elites of North Korea start wondering about their own survival if even the most loyal of loyalists who have served the Kim family for decades are not safe? Then who is?
Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Japan's cabinet has approved a set of controversial defense bills that will allow its military, under specific circumstances, to go beyond its self-defense stance and fight overseas if a close ally comes under attack. Defending the move to break away from his country's decades-old pacifist constitution, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said the new defense policy would deter threats and secure world peace. Speaking at a news conference on Thursday, Abe stressed that forging a permanent law would allow the government to dispatch its self-defense forces without delay. The so-called collective self-defense doctrine has come under intense scrutiny from both Korea and China. Ahead of the cabinet's approval, both countries warned Tokyo to exercise restraint and be transparent about its plans. The revised bill, which is widely expected to pass, will be submitted to Japan's parliament later today. A senior U.S. government official has stressed that concluding the Trans-Pacific Partnership Free Trade Deal is Washington's most important Asia-Pacific policy goal this year. In a statement submitted to a U.S. House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing on Thursday, Daniel Russell, Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, said failing to wrap up the 12-nation deal this year would be a major setback for the U.S. He added that the TPP could help East Asia and the Pacific for the century to come if it is sorted out soon, noting China's rapid rise in power and influence. Russell's remarks come as the Obama administration has faced stiffening resistance in the Senate to fast-tracking legislation related to the TPP. Now, although Korea and Japan relations have consistently worsened over historical issues, business leaders from both countries are calling for stronger economic bilateral cooperation. Our Gonsoa reports on progress made at their annual business meeting that took place on Thursday in Seoul.
This year, the annual Korea-Japan Business Conference fell on the 50th anniversary of normalized diplomatic ties between the two countries. That may seem ironic, considering the ongoing high-level impasse over historical tensions. However, business leaders interested in improving economic cooperation may be the best option for a breakthrough. Korea and Japan face many similar economic problems, such as the growing aging population and low labor participation of women compared to men. Despite those common challenges, their exports and imports have been going downhill, and their $170 billion currency swap ended earlier this year.
Bilateral finance policies cannot succeed without trust and support from the political arena. That's why we have to find a way to make a breakthrough to improve cooperation.
A joint statement adopted at Thursday's meeting might help. It includes plans to create new businesses together in third countries and cooperation on big sporting events like the Pyeongchang Winter and Tokyo Summer Olympics. The statement also focused on fast-tracking possible trade pacts.
FTA or EPA between Korea and Japan, that negotiation started, I think, almost 10 years ago, but it was suspended long time. And in the meantime, the FTA between China and Korea was agreed upon in February. And now, therefore, most important thing for us is to expedite and restart the negotiation, FTA, EPA between Japan and Korea.
Kamezaki said he hopes negotiations between Korea and Japan will be swifter than the three-way talks, including China. Later this month, Korea and Japan expect to hold the first ministerial-level trade talks in 2 years, offering hope economic ties will improve in the next 50 years. Gonsoa, Arirang News.
Turning now to the latest on the military camp shooting incident that left 3 dead, including the shooter. The Korean Army says the shooting spree was planned and that the reservist not only alluded to the shootings in text messages he sent to a friend, but had a history of mental illness. For more on the preliminary investigation results, Na Hyung-young reports.
On May 12th, I'll be a dead person. Goodbye. Che sent that text message to a friend prior to the shooting. May 12th is the day the mandatory 3-day training session for reservists began. The shooting spree happened the next day. Officials say Che told a drill instructor that he wanted to use the far-left shooting lane during the training session. This is one of the reasons the Army believes he had carefully planned the shooting. The position not only put him farther away from instructors, but it also meant he wouldn't have to worry about being taken down by the people behind him. The Army says it's still investigating the exact motive, but it did say Che had sought psychiatric help on 6 separate occasions before and after his service.
When he was serving in the Army, he was classified as a soldier in need of special care due to depression and maladaptation. He was also reassigned 4 times.
Che is said to have been under a lot of stress beginning earlier this year after he had tried but failed to earn a welding certificate. Thursday's investigative report also revealed that the shooting happened in a span of 10 seconds and that there were 9 controllers and instructors on site, none of whom were able to stop Che. The military is expected to face tough questioning, especially with regard to safety rules, as Che's rifle, which was supposed to have been chained to the ground, was loose, enabling him to carry out his plan. 나현경, Arirang News.
The ancient ruins of Palmyra are reportedly under threat from advancing Islamic State militants in Syria. An activist group says IS fighters are within touching distance of what is seen as one of the archaeological jewels of the Middle East. The jihadists are engaging in a battle with government forces in a very nearby town. Officials are concerned that if IS manages to overrun Palmyra, it will destroy everything there. The terror group has already demolished several sites of great historical importance in Iraq. UNESCO says the site, which dates back almost 2,000 years, contains the ruins of a great city that was one of the most important cultural centers of the ancient world. Well, that's all we have for now. I'm Mark Broome. Do have a wonderful weekend, and thanks as always for tuning in. We hope to see you at the same time on Monday. Until then, goodbye.